Okay, so that brings us into the animated shows. And for those of you who haven't seen the animated shows, that's okay. But the one animated show that you absolutely must know about and at least try once is the Clone Wars, because it defined an entire generation of Star Wars fans. Unfortunately, that was not me, because I don't know why. For the life of me, I could not, as a kid, watch a show with an ongoing storyline. I needed things to be, one-off episodes, like just watch one episode and then you just go to the next one. There's, like everyone returns to the couch is what I'm trying to say. Like I was better with, sitcoms, the easier cartoons, but for Clone Wars, that's very plot specific. I kind of skipped out on it while it was running, and I kind of regret that now. Well, no, I take that back. I first watched the Clone Wars when I got to college, and that's probably a good thing in retrospect, because then, at that point, I was able to appreciate it more, make some more objective decisions, with my more mature brain. And then, of course, the 7th season came around in, I think, 2020 it was. Again, the show, it was cut short in, I think, 2016, and then it got renewed for a 7th season, and that season really changed my opinions on this show, and it was absolutely fantastic. This show, although it's going to be very tricky to rank because there's so much that goes on in it, it's the longest running Star Wars show ever, I'm pretty sure. Well, not I'm pretty sure, it's pretty obvious just looking at the timeline, right? So there's a lot of different arcs. There's, of course, Ahsoka is who everyone claims to be the heart of the show, and she is. She's kind of the prequel character that never was. The show implies that she always existed in the background. Well, basically, the show started with a Clone Wars movie, which was theatrically released. I'm actually glad that it's not here, because I don't consider it to be a movie at all. It's kind of an anthology of episodes, really, and story arcs, and that's what first introduced us to Ahsoka Tano and the Clone Wars aesthetic, which at the time was not that great. The CGI was very budget. It was not too good. So that being said, even though the show had a weak beginning, it went on to do some very big and brave things. It taught us more about what it was to be a clone trooper, how they had personalities, they were not so expendable. This show actually made me appreciate the clones, period. Before watching the show, I didn't give a flying shit about the clones. I'll be real with you. The prequels didn't do anything for me in that respect. I played Republic Commando before that, but it still didn't quite click with me as much as it did. I played the game again later on down the road, and I loved that a lot more. We won't talk about the games right now. That could be another list if you like. But this show taught us so many things, filled in a lot of gaps for the prequels, and I imagine that's what The Mandalorian's trying to do for the sequels, but that's all speculation. Going back to the prequels, what else did it do? It taught us more about the relationship between Obi-Wan and Luke. It taught us more about the Force when he had the arc with the Ones, which I thought was a little bit too over the top, but it was still informative. It taught us a little bit about how there are ethereal beings within Star Wars, which is really fascinating. You also had the Force priestesses, who are, I think, the Wills, right? And ever since the very beginning, George Lucas always said they were the ones who were effectively telling the story of Star Wars. They were the omniscient beings who were seeing everything take place. I believe I have that right. I could be wrong, so I apologize for that if I am. And this show also brought back Darth Maul and made him into a real character. He survived the fall in Phantom Menace, and they made him a real standout character. I wouldn't say that he's one of my top tier favorites, but there's no denying he was a fantastically done character. Just not even a Sith anymore. Basically crawled out of a junkyard with the help of a brother. And from there on out, he was out for absolute revenge against Obi-Wan Kenobi, just causing total slaughter, a lot of trouble, a lot of damage, and his whole story was absolutely fantastic. I really loved what they did with him. It's a shame that they kind of cheapened him in Solo, but everything in Clone Wars was spectacular, especially in Season 7, where you had Ahsoka and Maul, both the children of dead orders that abandoned them. And as they're seeing the Sith rise and the Jedi fall, there they are in that moment. What are they going to do? You know, they're on the same footing. Neither of them are necessarily good or evil. They are two students without a teacher. And do they join hands in trying to figure this out for themselves? I wish Ahsoka took Maul's hand. That would have been so great to see a fallen Jedi and a fallen Sith try to figure out this whole galactic situation out together and become a team. But still, the ending we got was warranted. It made sense. Ahsoka still had faith in Anakin, and that's what caused her to not trust Maul's visions of Anakin being the key to the Empire's rise and the Republic's fall. And they had that absolutely shattering moment of another reimagining of Revenge of the Sith. Well, yes, Revenge of the Sith, but Order 66, this time from Ahsoka's point of view and Rex's point of view. And that was equally tragic. It just made things so much more difficult. And, man, even though he knew what was going to happen, it was between the score, the nonchalantness of the characters who didn't know what was about to happen. Like, this is a show that did such a good job respecting the audience, especially in the 7th season. Like, they knew, the show knew that you knew what was going to happen next. People were going to die, and there was going to be nothing that our heroes could ever do about it. Even if we knew that they would live, this was going to be a moment where they would have to make horrible, immediate sacrifices, whether they liked it or not. And it was so tragic. Then you had all the helmets on the sticks. Like, I think that's a moment that really told me what it is to be a clone. And to be a clone is tragedy, really. You're bred to be a weapon. And then you get that last scene with Vader, who we didn't see really in that last season as much. And then he is the consequence of all that has happened. And you see him walking up to the ruins of this last moment within the Clone Wars show. This is like the epilogue, right? He picks up a saber that he gifted to Ahsoka, turns it on. He sees that owl in the air, perhaps reflects, and then he walks away with that reflection of his silhouette in that clone helmet with Ahsoka's war paint painted on it. And that might be one of the greatest moments in TV and in Star Wars. That really hit me. And I can't say that the Clone Wars show in general is my favorite, but it had some of the best moments in Star Wars. Like, and I will say, there was a lot of filler in Clone Wars. There's a lot of nonsense arcs and characters that were totally stupid. Jar Jar came back, and I can't say in a very redemptive way. He was still kind of useless. Although they did redeem Tarpals, which is really cool. So I liked what they did with him. The droid storyline, where they were kind of just rolling around in a desert. That was so dumb, but I mean, that was there. And then I guess I'll just rattle through a whole bunch of arcs that I can remember. Everything they did with the Mandalorians was very good. I loved Pre Vizsla so much. It was just really cool to see a raw Mandalorian for the first time. Again, I watched a show before Din Djarin was a thing, but I feel like Pre Vizsla was the first time we saw what a Mandalorian really is supposed to be. Like, Boba Fett and Jango Fett were kind of unique cases because they kind of just did their own thing. But Pre Vizsla, I think, was our first Mandalorian. And just to see how blunt and scary he was, but at the same time so nonchalant as to all the horrible war crimes he did. And then the Darksaber and the way that he just shot his comrades if they screwed up. He was so intimidating. I wish we had him longer. I mean, his death made sense. I mean, Maul killed him so he could usurp the Mandalorian throne, and then that led to a whole other thing. And the whole Mandalorian arc was really good. There's so much that can be said about Clone Wars. There's so many arcs. Again, some were fantastic, some not as much. But overall, very, very good show. And what it was trying to do was kind of fill in some holes within the prequels, which were a little bit meandering at times and required some more insights. Like, it helped to know more about the clones. the prequels are definitely rushed, in that we could have learned more about certain characters. The clones are one of them. Like, they kind of just showed up in the movies, and but the Clone Wars show, I mean, the show is named after the clones, right? This actually gives you an insight into their lives and who they are and what they think about themselves. You're born from a test tube, and you're bred to do one thing, and that is obey orders, follow the Jedi, and destroy droids, and eventually just become a mindless puppet. And what do they do with that information? So there's a lot of very reflective, existential stuff going on in the show as well. So it is messy. I mean, there's a lot of plot points that kind of skew in different directions. Some conclude in more satisfactory ways than others, but overall, the good outweighs all the bad. I mean, definitely, for sure, I think. So, if this show is trying to patch up prequels, I think it did a very good job, but it did have a lot of fluff. So, I'll go ahead and put it below... I'll put it below A. Well, not D. No, we're not giving Clone Wars a D. That's unfair. We'll give it an A, because although it had a lot of fluff in it, it did succeed. It succeeded at filling in a lot of problems that the prequels had, and it also gave us a lot of new additions, but at the same time, it did have some fluff. Alright, now I'm reevaluating. Is it better than Mandalorian? It's more important than Mandalorian, I'd say, in doing some patch-up work. Is it more important than Revenge of the Sith? It enhanced Revenge of the Sith. That's a tough one. Alright, you know what? Sorry, I'm going to retract. I'm going to put it in below Revenge of the Sith, because it still had a lot of side arcs that kind of dragged it around. At least Revenge of the Sith had one straightforward plot, which I thought was a little bit easier. Yeah, Clone Wars, as great of a show as it is, I definitely found myself getting lost quite a bit, but the times where it was good, it was very, very good. So this is a classic for the ages and for all time. Now we are at The Bad Batch, which just, it was interesting. It kind of released just before, no, it didn't release before, what am I saying? In the final season of the Clone Wars, we were introduced to the Bad Batch, which is, of course, a defective batch of clones who kind of do their own thing and are kind of loose cannons. I actually wish a little more so. I wish they were a little bit more erratic than they are, but regardless, basically when Clone Wars concluded, Bad Batch effectively continued the story for people who enjoyed the Clone Wars show. And this show follows that same Bad Batch, and they are apparently unaffected by the chip that causes Order 66 to activate in their brains. So they pretty much go rogue, and they start taking up missions. They pretty much become bounty hunters, kind of, I guess. And they meet Omega, who is an unmodified... sorry, not unmodified, what am I saying? She's another mutated clone who is the only female Jango Fett clone, which is really fascinating. And she is apparently born at the same time as Boba Fett, and she is also unmodified, so she will live a normal human lifespan, unlike her clone brothers. So we talked about Omega a little bit when we did that action figure review about a month ago. So we could talk about her more in that review if you want to go back and look at that. But yeah, this show, I got mixed feelings on it. First of all, my favorite part of the show, I guess I'll start with, is Crosshair. Crosshair is my favorite clone trooper in Legends and in canon. He is very complex and fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Basically, his whole deal is he turns away from the Bad Batch and decides to stick to the Empire, which is so interesting. And the mystery throughout the first season is Crosshair under control of the chip? That's what the Bad Batch feels that he is. They think that he's not in his senses, but then when they finally do confront him at the end of that season, he says, I had my chip removed a very long time ago. So this is the first time we've seen a clone willingly adhering to the Empire because they believe that is the right direction for the galaxy. And that makes him so compelling. He doesn't think he's a bad guy. He is simply doing what he thinks is the right thing. I love Crosshair a lot. He's my favorite character in the show, and perhaps in all the animated shows. I'll have to think about that, but I really appraise him. That being said, I feel like for the rest of the Bad Batch, their story kind of meanders. It's a lot of filler. It's a lot of, as I was saying with Mandalorian Season 2, it's, here's a mission, go do it, I'll come back. Here's a new mission, go out and do that. You need credits, here you go. Go retrieve that Rancor, then come back, it'll be paid handsomely. So I feel like it keeps doing that, and they're not, again, having those little moments where you learn more about the characters, especially in Season 1, where it was kind of just Omega, Wrecker, and Hunter, and then Tech and Echo were kind of just Swiss Army knives that are used when they're necessary, kind of. So that was kind of unfortunate. They're a little bit improved in Season 2, and as of recording this, Season 2 is still ongoing, and I'm being very disappointed by it, unfortunately, I will say. My favorite episode thus far, of course, there was a Crosshair-centric episode that I really, really liked, and then he met Commander Cody, which is really cool, so it was nice that they wrapped up that loose end. The clone that tried to kill Obi-Wan, what happened to him, I really liked their back and forth. So Cody, the first clone that we ever saw respond to Order 66, we see that even he is questioning the Empire, but Crosshair, still, he is down for it, you know? He wants to do whatever is necessary. He is following his orders on his own will, and that's what makes him so interesting to me. But, yeah, other than that, I feel like the Bad Batch, the characters are cool. I like their character designs and everything. I think Omega's my favorite of them. But, I don't know, they just kind of, they're just doing back and forth missions that are kind of boring, kind of filler, and not very memorable. Like, I still look forward to seeing new episodes every Wednesday, but at the same time, I forget what episode I just saw, you know, because the episodes aren't very consequential. The last one I just saw, they're like kind of lost in the cave, kind of, and Echo kind of just disappears, like, before the episode even begins. So from a directing standpoint, I found that really, really odd. I didn't like that, unless I missed something. But at the same time, perhaps if the episodes are more memorable, I'd remember Echo disappearing. So I'm a little bit lost right now. So the show has some very good moments, but it's trying to tell the story of the Bad Batch, and I'm not sensing a lot of progression. And the one character that I really care about, being Crosshair, I don't feel like they're using him enough. I feel like he should be a serious antagonist for them, and he's not mentioned nor shown enough throughout the duration of the show. So I feel like the show has the resources to do something very cool, but they're taking too long. Like, not really giving them the benefit of the doubt. I feel like they're just falling back on just telling fun little stories here and there, and not doing a whole lot of growth. In the last episode, they did something with Omega that was pretty good, I liked. But, again, time will tell, but it's just not as strong as I feel like it could be. So I'm thinking, again, it has a distinct mission, unlike Phantom Menace, so I'm not going to give it a D tier. It's definitely not as good as Solo, not as good as Force Awakens. I mean, Force Awakens, even though the story is predictable, at least the story is in there. It's kind of with Boba Fett here. Like, it has some kind of a direction, but it is very fluffy, and but at the same time, it has a lot of meaningless storylines. But again, we can assume both these storylines are ongoing, so we'll kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. Man, I guess Bad Batch is not as well, none of these shows are really necessary. They're kind of just filler while the big wigs like Mandalorian get up to speed. It's really a tough one. There really is only one character that I seriously care about in Bad Batch. I hate to say that. The other ones are kind of just take them or leave them. Except for Omega. Omega's kind of cool, I suppose. Then again, she kind of just feels like another Rey at times. In that, you know, she's like a kid who's stuck on a planet, and she's amazed by everything that's around her. So, I have hope for her, but I feel like they're taking too long. So, you know what? I will put it below Book of Boba Fett because I find it disappointing. At least Book of Boba Fett had those really heavy, big moments with the Mandalorian stuff, even though it didn't belong in there. So this show gets lucky by default. The fact that it has those Mandalorian episodes to pad it out. Bad Batch, I can't recall an episode that blew my mind. I really can't. Like, anything with Crosshair is very, very cool, but there's nothing that hits, if you know what I mean. Okay, so that brings us to these last two shows, which I honestly do not remember totally well, but I think I remember them enough that I can give them a decent ranking. One of them is going to be super easy. We'll get there when we get there. But let's start out with Star Wars Rebels, which is kind of an interesting one. It was kind of running during the middle of Clone Wars. So Clone Wars obviously took place during the prequels, post Attack of the Clones, really. Star Wars Rebels took place before Rogue One chronologically and after Revenge of the Sith. It's kind of a split bag for me. I feel like the first two seasons were kind of meandering. I keep using that word, but that's kind of what it is, just kind of side stories, you know? But I do feel like I appreciated these characters more than I did the characters in the Bad Batch, even though I don't remember them as well. Like, Caleb Doom, I know he's called Kanan Jarrus, I always call him Caleb Doom, that's his real name before the Dark Times, right? But I thought his story was really compelling. He was a Jedi Padawan who lost his master, and funnily enough, we saw that moment happen in the Bad Batch, so that was kind of cool to see that event transpire. But then he's training this Ezra kid who's kind of just an orphan, and he is also Force sensitive, and he's kind of on the fence. He's not really light side or dark side. He's kind of just helping this ragtag group of misfits just accomplish their tasks. They're kind of, I guess, smugglers, kind of just transporting goods and weaponry and things like that. I also really like how Kanan has a relationship with Hera, which is really cool. Interspecies is always nice, and yeah, they play off of each other very well. Sabine Wren is also a good character with Ezra. Chopper's a very big fan favorite. He's a lot of fun. And then Garazeb Zeb Aurelios, which is a very fun name I will never get tired of saying. He was really cool too. Like, he's a big old grunt at first. He kind of can't be bothered with Ezra, but then he kind of learned about his past with just this massacre of his species. Like, he's one of the last of his line, which is really sad and unfortunate. And that alone makes me care about him more than I care about Wrecker and Bad Batch, you know? Like, just learning about these backstories and what these characters have gone through is enough for me to like a show more. Like, it really is that simple. Just tell us where these characters are coming from, pretty much. It's as simple as that. Yeah, so as for the plot and the story, the first two seasons I don't think were very good. They kind of were a little fluffy. They didn't move as much as I wish they would. I feel like the humor was a little bit overblown. Then again, this did run, on Disney Junior, I think, didn't it? Am I right about that? Disney XD? I don't recall exactly. I wasn't watching it as I was running. Again, I watched this with the Clone Wars during my college days, so I wasn't growing up with a show like everyone else was, which I kind of regret in some respects. I kind of missed out on that moment, but yeah, the first season, again, here we are again with the Inquisitors. The Inquisitors sucked in this show. They really did. They should have been an imposing force, but they proved to just be extremely expendable and not very consequential at all. Just a minor nuisance for the characters, you know? Excuse me. So I really do wish that we would have gotten more from them. It's unfortunate that we didn't, but I think the greatest moment from the first season and also from the first two seasons, and also the show overall, is of course you get Ahsoka, and then she meets Vader after Anakin has become no more, and then there are Mortis with Maul. That whole thing was excellent. I love that exchange, and then that ambiguity of where did Ahsoka go, which is still kind of up in the air. We still don't really know where she went after that. And then we have that really cool one take, kind of. Again, here's where my memory gets a little fuzzy, but I remember Ezra having that Sith holocron that Maul, I think, gave to him, and then his eyes illuminate red when it opens, and I love that prospect of a hero kind of falling to the dark again. But then that kind of gets usurped in the beginning of the season following. Like, he was kind of dark side for like 3 episodes, but then like right after that, I vividly remember that he's like, okay, never mind, I'm not doing the dark side stuff anymore. So I thought that was really cheap. I thought that had the potential to be something really, really great, one of the best arcs in Star Wars, and it kind of just got left on the cutting room floor. I thought that was really stupid. They definitely could have done more than that. I don't like using words like stupid because there are many ways that things can go. Obviously, people are going to prefer certain arcs and potential storylines more than others. But yeah, I just wish that we got a little bit more from this show. And honestly, that's kind of where my memory for the show ends. Thrawn was really cool. I liked how he was a very cold and calculating villain. I'd probably rewatch the show just for him, because I remember his dialogue was really neat. I love how he studied the culture of the people that he was attacking in order to know how to cripple them. Like, I remember he studied the Twi'lek species to know how to best Hera. I thought that was really cool. Yeah, a lot of cool, neat characters that are probably going to return at some point in Mandalorian. Like, Thrawn's definitely coming back. Ahsoka said that in Mando Season 2. So it leaves behind a lot of good elements that can be returned to. So we have a lot of that to look forward to. But at the same time, I can't say the show had a big effect on me. And I wouldn't say the show filled in many gaps. It's kind of just fluff for the sake of fluff, which is okay. Fluff isn't bad, I'll say that. It's bad in excess when a movie has a very specific mission and goal and aim, but for this one, it's kind of just meant to be a campy romp. It's a kid's show. I mean, it ran on Disney during its time. Not nearly as mature as Clone Wars, for sure. So it did a good job at being a cute show, and where it wanted to be dense, it got very dense and did a good job. So let's see where we're going to put this. I'll put it above Bad Batch, because I think Bad Batch has more potential to be something greater, and meanwhile, Rebels did a very good job with establishing the characters before they get into the deeper story. So, yeah, I'm going to put it above Boba Fett as well for those same reasons. Force Awakens, yeah, that's a tough one, because, this is a show in comparison to a movie. I feel like Solo did a better job at cleaning up loose ends than Rebels, so it's between Force Awakens and Rebels. I say, again, it's tough. I don't remember the show too well. Force Awakens, damn it. This is a trouble for me. I do hope you guys are okay with just playing this in the background, because there's a lot of pauses in here that I'm probably not going to be able to crop out. Forgive me for that. So it might get a little dull here and there, but yeah, I guess because Rebels managed to close off its characters for the most part, and meanwhile, Force Awakens had the task of jettisoning a trilogy, which it did not do a very good job at in hindsight. And that wasn't really the movie's fault. It was the movies that came after that were the problem. Okay, now we have last and potentially least, we have Resistance. Yeah, so first of all, this is the shortest running show within the Disney canon, mainly because I think people just outright did not like it. The art style is quite abominable and terrible on the eyes. I did not like how it looked. It felt very alienating. It felt very uncomfortable. Second, I didn't care about any of the characters. I really didn't. I think Kazdan Paratus was the name of the main lead. He felt... I'll be honest with you, every single character felt like they were Jar Jar Binks. They were moving around all the time, tripping, falling, screaming always. This was the epitome of what a kid show is. Like, no maturity. Even when Hux was giving that big old speech from Force Awakens, even that I couldn't take seriously. And that was its best moment, and that was a moment that was already done in a movie and better. So, there really was not a reason for the show to exist. It was just fluff. It was just for the kiddos. That's really it. I guess the only character I did care about was Pyre, and that's only because I liked his armor. I don't remember him as a character at all. I just thought he looked cool, and that was about it. And then Poe Dameron kind of gets shoehorned in there. I really don't remember much about this. I saw this show twice. The first time I saw it, I'll admit, I was bedridden with a really terrible flu, and I needed something to watch that didn't require too much brain action. Obviously, I made the right call there. And I did watch it a second time when I was conscious and no longer ill. And even then, I came out not really remembering what I watched. So, man, this show's a tricky one because I don't remember it too well. And the few things I do remember about it, I really did not like. It's just a lot of the characters are very bland or way too outrageous for me. And again, there might be people who really love this show, and I get it. Can you love this show? Sure. It's a genre show. That's the best I could put it. There weren't changes in the characters at all. There was one female character, I don't remember her name at all. She turned Imperial for like 2 episodes, and then she was not Imperial. Kind of an Ezra thing again, right? So that's kind of for moot. It does not add to the show's credit at all. So what was the show's mission? I think just to promote the era of the sequel trilogy. It definitely didn't add anything. You could ignore this show, and there are no footnotes to be had within the sequel trilogy that would make you want to reflect back onto this show and say, oh, like how a character got to this place, well, all started here, or whatever. Yeah, it was a very empty experience. It really wasn't a whole lot to gain from it, in my opinion. I mean, if there are any fans of this show, let me know in the comments, like, what can you recall about it that you liked? I mean, again, like, there's some properties here that I love and really hate, but there's something to like in everything that's here. I should save my more conclusory remarks for the very end of this when you do a little bit of a wrap-up, but yeah, go in the comments and let me know what you thought of Rebels too, but Resistance, because I just feel like it really was nothing. There was nothing there to be had. It's F tier. I have to put it at F tier because there was nothing to gain, nothing to be learned. So now here's a tough thing. How do we rank it with Rise of Skywalker? So Rise of Skywalker was everything with no purpose. Meanwhile, Resistance was nothing with the very basic purpose of just being an entertaining show, and I don't think it was entertaining at all. Wow, so I could kind of... There was more time to make The Rise of Skywalker great. There was more potential for this to be a fantastic movie. The fact, like, one thing I've been saying a lot recently is that if a fan is able to come up with a better plot for a pre-existing movie, then it's not a good movie. There are so many alternate storylines any old bloke has conjured up in their head that is leagues better than what we got in Rise of Skywalker. In fact, there is a script floating around called Duel of the Fates, and that is what the sequel that should have been and never was, but apparently Disney did not like that. The House of Mouse canceled it and went with this piece of garbage. Again, I like watching it. Is it a purposeful movie? It is not, and it did such a poor job tying up loose ends. As for Resistance, at least it closed everything up, even though there wasn't much to close up, so yeah, I'll give it a high F. It didn't it had a mission, it was just a really bad mission, so yeah, that's my ranking. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of review. Okay, so let's see what we have here as our final results. Again, I was kind of just doing everything on a whim, just spur of the moment, my immediate thoughts. I wasn't planning out this list at all. This is just what came to be. So let's go ahead and give it a look and see if we want to change anything. So far, I think it looks pretty good. I mean, it makes sense that most of the movies and shows would kind of conglomerate around the C range, which makes sense. I don't feel like I overstuffed the S tier. I think that makes sense. I might adjust that, but we'll start from the bottom and work our way up. Again, the main point of this list is to figure out whether or not a movie succeeded at what it was trying to do, or a show rather. So at F tier, yeah, I stand by Rise of Skywalker. Again, it's not the movie's fault that it was such a mess. It's just the 2 movies that came before it, even if they were concrete in certain respects, trying to join them together was basically an impossible task. So this movie's only mission was to close up the trilogy, and that was pretty much it. I can't say that the conclusions for the characters were as fulfilling as they could have been, so it was just really an overglorified mess of a fan film. Again, fun romp. I enjoy watching it still. I like that it's very ridiculous. I love the shot of all the crazy Star Destroyers up in the air. Again, it's goofy and stupid and fun, so I enjoy it for a watch. But as a movie, it fails. It's very, very bad. Resistance, there's really just not a lot to say about it. It's kind of empty. It's void. There's just not a whole lot here. I put it above Rise of Skywalker because at least it's good open and shut. It knows how to close up its loose ends very well. D tier. This is the only level where we have a single movie being The Phantom Menace. It didn't really have a direction, did it? But at least it was starting off. It was a launching point rather than an ending point, during which they had plenty of time to figure things out. Here, it's excusable that it's a little bit of a messy setup, so I can forgive that. And it was, again, mostly just a lot of side arcs. There wasn't really a solid, concrete story weaving everything together. And I'll be honest with you, I like Phantom Menace. I enjoy watching the movie. I love the soundtrack. I think the characters are pretty good. Jar Jar, I kind of forgive. Again, I kind of went over how he could have been a better character in an odd world, but yeah, I don't despise this movie as I despise other ones on this list that we've been talking about. Going up to the low C's, we have Bad Batch. Again, this is kind of take it with a grain of salt. The show is still ongoing. It's definitely going to conclude with the second season, and there might be more seasons after that. We don't know. So this might be an unfair ranking. I just feel like after 1.5 seasons, we should have gotten a lot more development by now. We should care a lot more about these characters, and I don't feel like we've gotten that, except for Crosshair, who we're not seeing enough of. So this isn't a final verdict for me. I feel like the show could still be great. I just am waiting very impatiently at this point. Book of Boba Fett. Again, this only is higher than Bad Batch because of those really superior Mandalorian episodes. But other than that, I bring this show down for the same reasons as Bad Batch, simply because it has a whole lot of characters who are cool, but they don't have those very integral character moments that I think would make us a lot more invested. Moving on to Force Awakens, it's a good setup. It's solid. The only issue is that it's very, very safe. I feel like they could have changed things up. Again, that moment with Kylo and Han on Starkiller, I feel like that single moment could have changed the trilogy forever and made it a lot more interesting, whether Kylo joins Han and says, "I've made mistakes, help me, I want to see Mom again." Something like that. You know, that would have been such a diversion, but a good one and a fascinating one. So it would have been so cool to see a full trilogy devoted to a redemption, you know? But yeah, other than that, it played it way too safe. And although I guess I will say that you did get invested in the characters enough, but there could have been a little bit more, I think. I put Rebels over it. I'm rethinking that. Again, Rebels closed out well, and I don't have a very good memory of it, so that's kind of not fair. So, you know what? I'm going to change this. I'm going to put Rebels beneath Force Awakens, but that's really because I don't remember Rebels too well. I guess here in Force Awakens, you still learn a decent amount of the characters for the startup. I guess it's not as unique of a story as comparison to Rebels, but Rebels at the same time is very fluffy. I guess it kind of keep these at an even pedestal. I only put Rebels lower because I don't remember it as well. I do have confidence to saying Solo is a better movie than Force Awakens because it's nice and open and shut. You learn about the characters. The movie knows what it is, and it does what it wants to do very well. It's a spaghetti western. It's very fun, very enjoyable. You can either watch it or not watch it. It's a totally safe viewing experience. Attack of the Clones, the script is its worst aspect, but I think the dialogue the dialogue's not very good, for at least for Padme and Anakin, but other than that, I like the story a lot. It's very film noir to me, as I've said, with Obi-Wan. I'm more interested in the mystery behind how the clone army came to be, Also, Obi-Wan's interactions with Dooku. I don't mind that it's a very dialogue-heavy film. Is it the best Star Wars film? Definitely not. But it is. It definitely contains elements that make you curious and want to learn more, which is a very important aspect to a movie, especially that is in between a beginning and an end of a trilogy. So, Last Jedi, definitely my least favorite Star Wars movie. Even though it's not the worst, it's the one that I definitely do not like watching. Yes, it is very, very successful at dividing the audience. I can't believe I'm saying that. It feels very oxymoronic and self-defeating, but that's what Rian Johnson wanted to do, and he did that. But I feel like it had very good messages and moments in there, but again, I'm so split on this one because every time something was done well, something was done very rudely, and I just didn't like it. So it succeeded, it just didn't succeed in the right way. And I see the potential in here. Again, there was very good stuff, but it just kept getting hooked on other tangents that just didn't matter, or just outright offensive to the previous lore that had already been established. Moving on to B, Kenobi, I feel a little weird putting it above movies because it was such a short show, but I mean, it's concrete, it's solid. Yeah, you got a story between Obi-Wan and Leia. Again, as I've said, I didn't know that would be a thing that we could use to understand these characters better, but their story was really good, and then everything with Reva and Anakin was fantastic. They were very well fleshed out. This show just did a very good job kind of blending the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy together, and it's nice and simple. It's easy, it's clean cut, not too challenging, and it's just a nice throwaway. I like it a lot. Mandalorian, a lot of potential here, and it's still going. Definitely the biggest Star Wars property right now. I think the one that people are going out of their way to see the most at this point in time. Very, very good moments, but at the same time, it is a little bit fluffy. I don't like how the second season was so linear, but I think the third one is going to be tops. I think it's going to be really cool. And besides, we have still gotten some really excellent moments in the show, a lot of character development. We care about these new characters, Mandalorian and Grogu, and we want to see them go further. I think the one big issue, as I've mentioned, is that Grogu is now in with Mandalorian in Season 3 all of a sudden, if you haven't watched Book of Boba Fett. So that's kind of an issue, but not really Mandalorian's fault. That's a fault of Boba Fett down there. So we get what we get there, and I'm still looking forward to the show. I'm curious to see what else goes on. Clone Wars, that set the template for what a Star Wars show should and could be. And overall, very, very good. Very fluffy, which is fine. It's okay to have some fluff in there to break things up. There's a lot of storylines in there, a lot that are very hard to keep track of, some very forgetful, some very memorable and unforgettable, especially with that very last season, those last 2 episodes, which were still astounding. I'm still processing them in my brain long after the fact. Beautifully done. And just the legacy the show has, from starting from a very cheaply done theatrically released movie, which was kind of just a bundle of nothing episodes, to that amazing climax at the very end, beautifully rendered, gorgeously directed. Like, I forgot to mention, this show is very well directed, like cinema-wise. It's very good. And yeah, it helps to patch up plot holes from the prequels and also lead into the original trilogy really well. So yeah, great experience. Definitely give it a shot if you haven't tried it. Revenge of the Sith, very good movie. A lot of people don't appraise this as much as I feel like they should. It has its problems. Again, Grievous kind of comes out of nowhere, which is odd, but we get the hello there line, so maybe it's warranted and we can allow for that. But Hayden Christensen, definitely an upgrade. I think he did a lot better. Better script for sure. Order 66, I feel like it might have been rushed in some capacity, but that's only because the TV shows helped to flex that out more and show us how devastating it truly was. But during the time of this movie being on its own and being the only example of Order 66 that we had, it did a stellar job. And then, of course, you had the duel on Mustafar, which is very pivotal. You had Anakin becoming Vader. Again, if that was tweaked a little bit, I might put that into the A tier, but I won't. But yeah, and also the score is very, very crazy and amazing here. John Williams used every resource at his disposal to make this movie phenomenal to listen to. So, and this was such a crazy experience when it comes to leading into the original trilogy. And it did a very beautiful job at that. So that stays here at B. It does not go to A because it still wasn't quite a good movie. It still had some filler, clunky writing and stuff like that. That brings us to A tier, where we did not have any clunky writing and everything that happened mattered. Again, Return of the Jedi Ewoks, they are justified. I am good with them. They make sense. That is the only low point for this movie that I could really think of, and I'm okay with them. It makes sense that they are able to destroy the Empire to some capacity. They know the Forest. They're able to use nature to their disposal. And Palpatine, being the pompous, overzealous leader that he is, he has the stormtroopers very ill-prepared, and we see that exemplified on Endor. So it makes sense that they'd have their own clunky asses handed to them, I suppose. And then, of course, you have the whole arc with Luke and his father. I mean, that can never be topped. That was absolutely beautifully done. And then going on to the A tier, we're still in A tier, what am I talking about? Going on to New Hope, I put that above Return of the Jedi just because, that's right. Again, Leia, they could have done more with Leia in Return of the Jedi, I think. But here in New Hope, everything was solid. Kind of like with Kenobi, it didn't require a whole lot of knowing what happened before or after. It's kind of just its own isolated story, and it works fine. And again, just for the sake and for the love of sheer creativity, it did such a beautiful job, and it started everything. I mean, if you're a Star Wars fan, you probably do not dislike this movie. I don't see how you could. It was just a lot of fun, and it introduced us to a very beautiful galaxy far, far away that existed a long time ago. Going on to the S tiers, I'm sure there's some controversial opinions here when you're looking at this. Andor, so well written. It's tying together so many different aspects from so many different movies. Lots of character study. It's probably the most intelligent of all the Star Wars properties that we have on this list here. It has the most to say. It has the most characters that you want to see progress and see where they wind up. Again, this could get notched down too as well, or it could get notched up. This show is still ongoing. I think Season 2 is confirmed. I want to see more. I put Rogue One above Andor because that was open and shut. We know where these characters ended up at that point. There's no longer that ambiguity, basically. It is one of my favorite Star Wars movies. I think top 3 for sure. And again, it does such a good job at introducing all these characters and making you care about them before they are wiped out. So, I mean, that's a reason why Andor might surpass Rogue One, because if you continue to love the characters more and their arcs outweigh the ones that we see in Rogue One, then yeah, I would put it above. But then very lastly, we have Empire Strikes Back. Not my personal top number 1 Star Wars movie, but it is objectively the most seminal and important, and it basically changed all of cinema as we know it. I mean, if you didn't have that I am your father reveal, if you didn't have Luke going through that classic hero's journey of rushing himself and then losing a hand and being totally defeated, and then this movie does the best job at having the audience want to know what happens next. This movie is the epitome of the to be continued text box that we see on the last panel of a comic, right? You want to know how Vader is going to deal with Luke now knowing that he is his son. Well, he already knows that, of course, but now that he knows that Luke knows, what are they going to do with that information? How is Luke going to cope? Will they get Han Solo back? It sounds like the end of a TV show, which again is kind of what George Lucas is trying to do. He's trying to harken back to his influences. So this Empire Strikes Back is the most successful at being a sequel, in my opinion. And perhaps objectively, but again, I don't want to be too objective. But yeah, anyways, I'll go ahead and be quiet because I'm very bad at doing that these days. But yeah, again, all these shows and movies, they all have some form of merit. They all have some form of nostalgia. I did my best to strip away nostalgia as much as I could for this list. Maybe we'll come back and I'll do these solely based on how much I enjoy them. Obviously, you know who's going to be at the bottom and who's going to be at the top. That would be a faster list. We wouldn't have to deep probe any of them quite as much. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting experiment. I'm not sure how I'm going to upload these many hours of footage and audio that I have, but yeah, let me know how you liked them. I might divide these into parts, maybe do one for when we're doing the movies and when we're doing the shows. I'm gonna have to think about that one, but yeah, I hope you like just kind of listening to my banter. Hopefully you're doing something fun or worthwhile in the background. If you enjoyed this, then we'll do more videos like this in the future. If you enjoyed this, then please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you all in the next one. See you all later.